The tears she'd nearly had under control flooded back, hot and fast as the panic. On a sob, she stumbled to the door, fought the locks open, rushed out. "Abigail!" Don't. I don't know what to do. I need to think, to find some composure. You should go until I can speak rationally." "Do you think I'd leave you alone when you're twisted up like this? I tell you I love you and it feels like I broke your heart." She turned, her hand fisted over her heart, her eyes drenched with tears and emotion. "No one ever said that to me. In my life, no one's ever said those words to me." "I'm making you a promise right here that you'll hear them from me every day." No, don't promise, don't. I don't know what I'm feeling. How do I know it's not just hearing those words? It's overwhelming to hear them, to look at you and to see you mean them. Or it seems you do. How do I know? You can't know everything. Sometimes you have to trust. Sometimes you have to just feel. I want it. She kept her hand clutched over her heart, as if opening her fingers would allow it all to fly away. I want it more than I can stand. Then take it. It's right here. It's not right. It's not fair to you. You don't understand. You can't. Abigail, that's not even my name. She slapped a hand over her mouth, sobbed against it. He only stepped to her, brushed tears from her cheek. I know. Every ounce of color draining, she stumbled back, gripped the porch rail. How could you know? You're running or hiding from something or someone, maybe some of both. You're too damn smart to run and hide under your real name. I like Abigail, but I've known it's not who you are right along. The name's not the issue. You're trusting me enough to tell me is. And it looks like we're getting there. Does anyone else know? Scares the hell out of you. I don't like that. I don't see why anyone else would know or care. Have you let anyone else get as close as you've let me? No, never. Look at me now. He spoke quietly as he moved to her. Listen to me. I am. I'm going to tell you, I won't let you down. You're going to come to believe that, and we'll go from there. Let's try this part again. I'm in love with you. He eased her into a kiss, kept it soft until she'd stopped trembling. There, that wasn't so hard. You're in love with me. I can see it and I can feel it. Why don't you try the words? I don't know. I want to know. Just try them out. See how it feels. I won't hold you to it. I'm in love with you. Oh, God. She closed her eyes. It feels real. Say it again and kiss me. I'm in love with you. She didn't ease in, but flung herself, starving for that knowledge, the gift, the light of it. Love, being loved, giving it. She hadn't believed in love. She hadn't believed in miracles. Yet here was love. Here was her miracle. I don't know what to do now. We're doing fine. She breathed in, out. Even that felt different, freer, fuller. I want to heat up the food. I want to teach you how to use chopsticks and have dinner with you. Can we do that? Can we just be for a while? Sure we can. If she needed a little time, he could give it. But I'm not promising anything on the chopsticks. You changed everything.
Good or bad?
She held on another minute. I don't know, but you changed it. Chapter 21. Dealing with the meal settled her down, the simplicity and routine. He didn't pressure her for more. That, she understood, was his skill and his weapon. He knew how to wait. And he knew how to change the tone, to give her room, to help her relax, so her thoughts weren't tied up in knots of tension. His clumsiness with the chopsticks, though she suspected at least some of it was deliberate, made her laugh. She'd laughed more since he'd come into her life than she had in the whole of it before him. That alone might be worth the risk. She could refuse it, ask for more time. He would give it to her, and she could use it to research another location, another identity, make plans to run again. And if she ran again, she'd never know what might have been. She'd never feel what she felt now, with him. She'd never again allow herself to try. She would find contentment, security, she had before, but she'd never know love. Her choice was to take the rational route, leave, stay safe, or to risk it all, that safety, her freedom, even her life, for love. "Can we walk?" she asked him. "Sure." "I know you're tired," she began as they stepped outside. "We should wait to talk about everything."
"Tomorrow's as good as today."
"I don't know if I'll have the courage tomorrow."
"Then tell me what you're afraid of."
"So many things. But now, most of all, that if I tell you everything, you won't feel the same about me. And for me." Brooks reached down, picked up a stick, threw it. Bert looked at Abigail, got her signal, and chased after it.
"Love doesn't turn on and off like a light switch."
"I don't know. I've never been in love. I'm afraid to lose it, and you. And this, all of this. You have a duty, but more, you have a code. I knew a man like you, more like you than I realized at first. He died protecting me."
"From whom?"
"It's complicated."
"Okay. Did he love you?"
"Not the way I think you mean. It wasn't romantic or sexual. It was duty. But he cared about me beyond that. He was the first person who cared for me." She pressed a hand to her heart. "Not for what I represented or what I accomplished or what I was expected to be, but who I was."
"You said you don't know who your father was, so not your father. A cop?"
"Duty."
"Were you in witness protection, Abigail?"
Her hand trembled. Did he see it or just sense it, she wondered. But he took it in his, warmed and stilled it. "I was being protected. I would have been given a new identity, a new life, but it all went very wrong."
"How long ago?"
"I was 16.
16?
I turned 17 on the day—" John's blood on her hands. "I'm not telling you the way I should. I never even imagined telling anyone."
"Why don't you tell me the beginning?"
"I'm not sure where it is. Maybe it was when I realized I didn't want to be a doctor, and I knew that for certain in my first semester of pre-med."
"After things went very wrong?"
"No, I'd completed pre-med, the requirement for medical school, by then. If I'd continued, per my mother's agenda, I'd have continued into medical school the next fall."
"You said you were 16.
"Yes, I'm very smart. I took accelerated courses throughout my education. My first term at Harvard, I lived with a family she selected. They were very strict. She paid them to be. Then I had one term on my own in a dorm, but carefully supervised. I think my rebellion started the day I bought my first pair of jeans and a hoodie. It was thrilling.
Back up. You were at 16, in Harvard, in pre-med, and bought your first pair of jeans?
My mother bought or supervised the acquiring of my wardrobe. Because it still seemed huge to her, she smiled. It was horrible. You wouldn't have looked at me. I wanted so much to be like the other girls. I wanted to talk on the phone and text about boys. I wanted to look the way girls my age looked. And God, I didn't want to be a doctor. I wanted to apply to the FBI, to work in their cyber crimes unit.
I should have figured, he murmured.
I monitored courses, studied online. If she'd known, I don't know what she would have done. She stopped at the View where she'd wanted a bench and wondered if she'd ever have reason to buy one now that it was too late to stop in the telling. She'd promised me the summer off from studies, a trip, a week in New York, then the beach. She'd promised, and that had gotten me through the last term. But she'd made arrangements for me to participate in one of her associate's summer programs, intense study, lab work. It would have looked well on my record, accelerated my degree. And I, for the first time in my life, defied her.
About damn time.
Maybe, but it started a terrible chain of events. She was packing, she was covering for another associate and keynoting at a conference. She'd be gone a week, and we argued. No, not accurate. Annoyed with herself, Abigail shook her head. At such times, accuracy was vital. She didn't argue. There was simply her way, and she had no doubt I'd fall in line. She concluded my behavior, my demands, my attitude was a normal phase. I'm sure she noted it down for my files. And she left me. The cook had been given 2 weeks off, so I was alone in the house. She left without a word while I was sulking in my room. I don't know why I was so shocked she'd leave that way, but I was, sincerely shocked. Then I was angry, and maybe exhilarated. I took her car keys and I drove to the mall.
To the mall.
It sounds so silly, doesn't it? My first real taste of freedom, and I went to the mall. But I had a fantasy about roaming the mall with a pack of girlfriends, giggling about boys, helping each other try on clothes. And I ran into Julie. We'd gone to school together for a while. She was a year or so older, and so popular, so pretty. I think she spoke to me that day because she'd broken up with her boyfriend and was at loose ends. Everything just happened from there. She told him about shopping, how it made her feel, about the hair dye, the plans to make fake IDs and go to the club.
That's a lot of teenage rebellion in one day.
I think it was stored up.
I bet. You could make passable IDs at 16?
Excellent ones. I was very interested in identity theft and cybercrimes. I believed I'd have a career as an investigator.
It wouldn't surprise me.
It's flattering you'd say so. It mattered so much once. That day, in the mall, I took Julie's picture, and I took my own later. I cut my hair, and I dyed it black. Very black, and I bought makeup, used it the way Julie showed me. And I'd studied the other girls in college, so I knew how to apply it.
Hold on a minute. I'm trying to picture you with short, black hair.
He studied her, narrowed his eyes.
A little goth, a little funky.
I'm not sure, but I looked very different from the way my mother wanted me to look. I suppose that was the point.
Sure it was. And the other point is you were entitled to it. Every kid is.
Maybe that's true. I should have stopped there. It should have been enough. The clothes, the hair, and makeup. And the program she'd assigned me to started that Monday, and I'd made up my mind not to go. She would have been furious, and that should have been enough. But I didn't stop there.
You were on a roll, he commented. You created the fake IDs and got into a club.
Yes, Julie picked the club. I didn't know anything about them, but I looked up the one she wanted, so I knew it was owned by a family known, really, to be Russian mafia. The Volkovs.
Rings a dim bell. We didn't deal with the Russians as a rule in Little Rock. Some Irish, some Italian mob types.
Sergei Volkov is the Pakan, the boss of the Volkov Bratva. He and his brother owned the club. I learned later it was run primarily by Sergei's son Ilya. His cousin Alexei worked there, ostensibly. Primarily, again I learned later, Alexei drank there, did drugs and women there. I didn't know or understand any of that when we met him. We drank Cosmopolitans, Julie and I. They were popular because of the television show Sex and the City. We drank and danced, and it was the most exciting night of my life. And Alexei Guryevich came to our table. She told him everything, how the club had looked to her, sounded, how Ilya had come, how he'd looked at her, talked to her, how she'd been kissed for the first time in her life, and by a Russian gangster. We were so young and so foolish, she continued. I didn't want to go to Alexei's house, but I didn't know how not to go. I felt ill, and when Ilya had to stay back, promising to meet us later, it was worse. Alexei's house wasn't far from my mother's, really. I imagined just going home, lying down. I'd never been drunk before. It had stopped being pleasant.
It'll do that.
Did you ever, when you were a teenager?
Russ and I got drunk and sick together a few times before we hit the legal age, and a few times after.
It was my first and last time, and I've never had another Cosmopolitan. Even looking at them makes me vaguely ill. And a little afraid, she admitted to herself. He had a beautiful home, with a river view, furnished with too much deliberation, I thought, too consciously trendy. He made more drinks, put on music, but I felt ill, and I used the bathroom off the kitchen to be sick. Sicker than I'd ever been in my life. All I wanted to do
was curl up on the floor and die.
Yes. She laughed a little. I suppose it's something a lot of people experience at least once. I still didn't feel well when I came out, and I saw Julie and Alexei were having sex on the sofa. I was fascinated and horrified at the same time, and so embarrassed. I went out through the kitchen to the terrace. It felt better in the air. I sat on a chair and fell asleep. And the voices woke me.
You're cold.
Because she'd started to shiver, Brooks put an arm around her shoulders. I was cold that night, with the breeze off the water, or the sickness, or with what happened next. This feels the same. I'd like to walk back. It may be easier to tell you when we're walking.
Okay.
I planned to put a bench here, something organic, something that looks like it just grew here. I like the view, and it's so quiet, with just the stream gurgling and the birds. See how Bert likes to play in the water? It feels like it's all mine. Silly.
It's not.
Silly, she repeated in her head. That night, I looked through the glass of the sliding doors, and I saw two men with Alexei. I didn't see Julie. They were speaking Russian at first, but I'd studied Russian. I like languages, and I have an aptitude for them. I understood. The man, his name was Korotsky, Yakov Korotsky, accused Alexei of taking money from the family. They argued, and at first Alexei was very arrogant. But that didn't last. They said he'd informed to the police because he'd been arrested for drugs. The other man, he was big, forced Alexei to his knees, and Alexei became afraid. He tried to bargain, to threaten, then to beg. "Would you hold my hand?" He took it, squeezed gently. "Stop when you need to stop." "It needs to be finished. Korotki shot him once, then twice at the temple. He shot him the way you might start your car or put on your shirt, an ordinary thing. Then Julie came out. She wasn't dressed, she'd been sick, she barely spoke, barely saw, and Korotki shot her, like a reflex, like you swat at a gnat. God! God!" "Here now, lean on me." He released her hand, but only to wrap an arm around her, tuck her in as they walked. He was angry, though, Korotki, because he hadn't known she was there, because his information hadn't included her. Or me. They didn't know about me, huddled outside the sliding door, frozen, just frozen. She shouldn't have come outside, Abigail thought. Her legs didn't feel steady, and her stomach had begun to churn. She wished she could sit, wished she couldn't, still, see and hear and feel it all so clearly. "That's enough now," Brooks murmured. "Let's get you back inside." Ilya came. He'd kissed me, my first. He was so beautiful, and he'd kissed me and made me feel like I was real. I don't think I'd ever felt quite real, except when I'd bought the jeans and the hoodie, then when I dyed my hair, then when Ilya Volkov kissed me. That's not relevant. Yes, it is. He came in, and he was angry. Not that his cousin had been murdered, but because Korotki was supposed to assassinate Alexei the next night. And I knew the man, the first man who'd kissed me, would kill me. He knew I was there, and they'd find me and kill me. He cursed Alexei. He kicked him and kicked him. He was already dead, but Ilya was so angry he kicked him. I saw that in Justin Blake last night. I saw what I saw in Ilya in him. It's more terrifying than any weapon. She smelled her garden now, just a hint of it, spice and sweet on the air. It comforted as much as Brooks's arm around her. So I ran. I'd taken off my new shoes, but I didn't think of that. I ran without paying attention to where, just blind terror, running, sure they'd catch me and kill me because I'd defied my mother, done what I wanted to do, and Julie was dead. She was just 18. All right, it's all right now. It's not all right, and not all. It's not nearly all. I fell, and my purse flew out of my hand. I didn't even know I still had it. My phone was in my purse. I called the police. They came, the police, and found me. I told them what happened. I talked to 2 detectives. They were kind to me. Detectives Griffith and Riley. They helped me. Okay, give me your keys. My keys? We'll go inside now. I need your keys. She fished them out, handed them to him. They took me to a house, a safe house. They stayed with me. And then John came. Deputy U.S. Marshal John Barrow and Deputy U.S. Marshal Teresa Norton. You're like him, like John, patient, insightful, and kind. We're going to sit down. I'm going to start a fire, make you some tea. It's too late in the season for a fire. I want a fire, okay? Of course. She sat obediently. I feel a little strange. Just sit there. Rest a little till I'm done. They called my mother. She came back. She didn't want me to testify or to stay in the safe house the marshals had waiting, or to go into witness protection. She was worried about you, Brooks said as he set the kindling. No, she wanted me to start the summer project, to go back to Harvard, to be the youngest neurosurgeon ever on staff at Chicago's Silva Memorial Hospital.
I was ruining her agenda, and she'd gone to so much time and effort. When I wouldn't go with her, she walked out, as she had the day it all began. I've never spoken to her again."
Brooks sat back on his heels.
"She doesn't deserve a word, not one word from you."
He struck a match to the paper he'd crumbled, watched it flame up, catch the kindling. He felt like that, he realized, ready to flash and burn. That was the last thing she needed.
"I'm going to make that tea. Just rest for a few minutes."
"I want to tell you all of it."
"You will, but you take a break now."
"Are you going to call the marshals? The FBI?"
"Abigail."
He took her face in his hands.
"I'm going to make you tea. Trust me."
He wanted to strike something, break something to pieces, to punch his fist into something hard that would bloody it. She'd been abused as surely as if she'd been found with bruises and broken bones by a mother who could walk away from a traumatized, terrified child. He put the kettle on. She needed to get warm again, feel safe and quiet again. He'd needed to know what she told him, but he wished he'd let it go, let it slide away from both of them. Still, as the kettle heated, he took out his notebook, wrote down all the names she'd given him, then tucked the notebook away again, made her tea. She sat very straight on the couch, very pale and very straight, her eyes shadowed.
"Thank you."
He sat beside her.
"I need to say some things to you before you go on with this."
She stared into her tea, braced.
"All right." "None of this was your fault."
Her lips quivered before she firmed them.
"I have some responsibility. I was young, yes, but no one forced me to make the IDs or go to the club."
"That's just bullshit, because neither of those things make you responsible for what happened after. Your mother's a monster." Her head snapped up. Her shadowed eyes went huge. Worse! She's a fucking robot, and she tried to make you one, too. She let you know from the get-go she'd created you to her specs. So you're smart and beautiful and healthy, and you owe her for that. More bullshit. My genetic makeup... Shut up! I'm not done. She made you dress as she wanted, made you study what she wanted, and all lay odds made you associate with people she chose, read what she chose, ate what she fucking creed. Am I wrong? Abigail could only shake her head. She may never have raised her hand to you, may have kept you clothed, fed, with a nice roof over your head, but honey, you were abused for the first 16 years of your life. A lot of kids would have run away or worse. You cut your hair and snuck into a club. You want to blame somebody other than the shooter and his boss for what happened? Blame her. But have you ever had any therapy? I'm not crazy. No, you're not. I'm just asking. I was in therapy as long as I remember until I left home. She engaged one of the top child therapists in Chicago. You never had any choice on that either. No, Abigail said with a sigh. No, choices weren't on her agenda. He took her face, laid his lips on hers. You're a miracle, Abigail. That you could come from something that cold-blooded, that cold-hearted, and be who and what you are. You remember that. You can tell me the rest when you're ready. Will you kiss me again? You don't have to ask me twice. Again, he took her face in his hands, leaned in to lay his lips warmly on hers. She curled her fingers around his wrists to hold him, hold there a moment longer. She wasn't sure he'd want to kiss her once she'd told the whole of it. She told him about John, about Terry, the house itself, the routine of it, the legal delays. Stalling a bit, she admitted. She told him about Bill Cosgrove teaching her poker, and Linda doing her hair. It was, in a terrible way, the best time of my life. I watched television, listened to music, studied, cooked, learned, had people to talk to. John and Terry, I know it was a job, but they were family to me. Then my birthday came. I didn't think they knew or would think anything of it, but they had presents for me, and a cake. John gave me earrings. I'd gotten my ears pierced that day at the mall with Julie, and he gave me my first real pair of earrings. And Terry gave me a sweater. It was so pretty. I went up to my room to put the earrings and the sweater on. I was so happy. She paused for a moment, working out how to explain to him what she'd never fully explained to herself. It wasn't like the day in the mall. The happiness wasn't fueled by rebellion and novelty and lies. It was so deep, so strong. I knew I'd wear that sweater set, those earrings on the day I testified in court. That while I couldn't bring Julie back, I would have a part in getting justice for her. And when it was done, I'd become who I wanted to be. Whatever name they gave me, I'd be free to be myself. And then, I don't know everything that happened. I can only speculate. I've put it together so many ways. The most logical is that Bill Cosgrove and the agent who substituted for Linda that night, his name is Keegan, came in through the kitchen as usual. I think Terry was in there alone and John in the living room. She must have sensed or suspected something. I don't know what or why. They killed her, or at that point disabled her, but she managed to call out to John first, so he was alerted. But he couldn't get to me, couldn't get to the stairs without exposing himself. I heard the gunfire. Everything happened so fast. I ran out of the bedroom and saw John. When John got to me, he was shot, several times. He was bleeding, from the leg, the abdomen. He pushed me back in the bedroom, and he collapsed. I couldn't stop the bleeding. She looked down at her hands. I couldn't stop it. I knew what to do, but I couldn't help. He didn't have much time. There wasn't much time. He told me to run, to take what I could and get out through the window. I couldn't trust the police. If they had Cosgrove and the other, they'd have more. The Volkoffs. I didn't want to leave him like that, but I went out the window, with the money I had, with my laptop, some clothes, with his ankle weapon. I was going to try to call for help. Maybe if help came, he wouldn't die. I didn't know if Terry was alive or dead. I'd barely gotten a block away when the house exploded. I think they'd planned to blow it up, with me in it. They'd have taken over from John and Terry, staged something, and blown up the house. Where did you go? I went home. My mother would be at work, and the cook would have gone for the day. I still had my key. I went home so I could hide until my mother got home. And I found she'd boxed up all my things. Some were already gone. I don't know why that upset me so much, considering. I do. Well, I opened her safe, and I took money from her. $10,000. It was wrong, but I stole from my mother, and I left. I've never been back. I walked, tried to think. It had been storming, but now it was just rain, just rainy and dark. I knew John and Terry were dead, and the last thing he told me to do was run. I saw a pickup truck with Indiana plates outside a coffee shop. I got in the back, under the tarp. I fell asleep somewhere along the drive, and when I woke up, I was in Terre Haute. I found a motel, paid cash. I went to a drugstore and bought bright red hair dye. It turned my hair orange, but I looked different. I slept again.
A long time. Then I turned on the television, and I saw on CNN the report about John and Terry, about the house, about me. They thought I'd been in the house. They were looking for our remains. I nearly called the police. I had Detective Griffith's card, but I was afraid. I decided I'd wait, buy a cell phone, a disposable, in case. I waited another day, eating in the room, barely leaving it, watching the news, trying to find out more through the internet. She paused, took a long breath. Then I found out more. They didn't think I was in the house. They knew I wasn't. There was speculation someone had abducted me, and other speculation that I'd snapped, shot John and Terry, blown up the house. Cosgrove and Keegan had each other to back up the story, how they'd gotten there just seconds too late. And Cosgrove was wounded.
John got a piece of him? What about ballistics?
It was through and through. They said the lights went off and they couldn't be sure who fired at them, but Keegan got Cosgrove out. The house exploded as he called it all in. So I ran. I took a bus to Indianapolis. I got supplies, another motel, and I made new identification, and with it and some of the cash, I bought a used car from a junk dealer that got me to Nashville. I waited tables there for 3 months. Then I changed my hair again, my ID again, and moved on. She drew another breath. There wasn't much on the news anymore, and I wasn't quite able to hack into the files, the U.S. Marshals and FBI. I went to MIT on a forged ID and transcripts, and monitored classes on computer science and anything else that seemed helpful. I connected with a student there, a boy. He knew a lot about hacking, more than I did. I learned from him. I slept with him, then I left him. I think he cared for me a little, but I left him with only a quick note once I'd learned all he could teach me. I moved around every few months, a year at the most. Changed IDs, modified my appearance. The details aren't really important. She paused again. I'm wanted for questioning in the murder of 2 U.S. Marshals. He said nothing, just pushed to his feet, walked over to the window. And the world dropped away for Abigail. He would be finished with her now, she thought. Everything would be finished now.
Have you kept tabs on Cosgrove and Keegan over the years?
Yes. Keegan has been promoted several times.
Good. You know where they are, what they're doing. That'll save time and work.
I don't understand. He turned back to her.
You don't think we're going to let those 2 bastards get away with murdering 2 good cops and implicating you? For keeping you running since the day you turned 17? For doing all that so another murderer and his murdering, thieving, son of a bitching friends and associates could walk on killing an innocent girl? She could only stare at him. You believe me? Jesus, of course I believe you. I'd believe you even if I wasn't in love with you. It's so obvious you're telling the truth. You still love me? Listen up. He stalked back over to her, pulled her to her feet. I demand more respect than that from you. I'm not some weak-spined, half-ass fuckhead who slithers off when everything's not just exactly perfect. I loved you an hour ago. I love you now. I'm going to keep right on loving you, so get used to it and stop expecting me to let you down. It's insulting and it's pissing me off. I'm sorry. Good. You should be. He yanked her in for a kiss, let her go. Where'd you learn to shoot? John taught me initially. I lived in Arizona for a time and took lessons from an old man. He was a conspiracy theorist and a survivalist. He was interesting, but not entirely stable. But he liked me and was very knowledgeable. I spent time at a number of universities under assumed names. I needed to learn. What's in the locked room upstairs?
I'll show you.
She led him up, unlocked the triple locks.
It's a safe room, she said, as she opened the door.
And a friggin' arsenal, he noted. Handguns, long guns, knives, shelves of packaged food, bottled water, a computer setup as elaborate as her station downstairs, a chem toilet, clothes, wigs, hair dye, batteries, he saw as he wandered, flashlights, dog food, books, a frickin' grappling hook, tools. Did you set this up yourself?
Yes. I needed to learn, as I said. I learned. I have several alternate IDs and passports in here, in a lockbox. Cash, credit cards, and the laminate and paper I need to make still more IDs if necessary. It's against the law.
Oh, yeah, I'll arrest you later. Okay, you know how to protect yourself and you think ahead. You've been at this how long now?
12 years.
Long enough. Time to stop running.
I want to. Today, I thought...
What?
It's not rational.
Jesus, Abigail.
Despite it all, he had to laugh.
Be irrational.
It seemed like a circle. Seeing Ilya in Justin Blake, seeing what I thought of Sergei Volkov in Lincoln Blake, seeing so much of what I admired in John in you, and finding I could stand up to the Blakes, I could do the right thing and not panic or run. It seemed like I could make the running stop, but I don't know if I can.
You can. I want another beer. I want to think. We'll figure this out, and we'll fix it.
Brooks.
Beer. Thinkin', figurin', and fixin'. You've stopped being alone, Abigail. You'll have to get used to that, too. What's your real name, anyway?
She took a breath.
Elizabeth.
Her voice sounded rusty on the word. Elizabeth Fitch. He angled his head.
You don't strike me as an Elizabeth.
For a little while, I was Liz.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm partial to Abigail, but I can see Liz. So.
He stepped forward, took her hand.
Nice to meet you, Liz.
Chapter 22. It wore her out, Brooks realized as he sat drinking his beer and thinking. The telling of it, and, he imagined, the reliving of it. She'd wedged herself into the corner of the couch, drooping. So he kept his silence, let her drift away a while the fire went to simmer and the breeze kicked up against the windows. Storm coming on, he thought. 12 years on the run. She'd turned 17 and had, or believed she'd had, nothing and no one to depend on but herself. He pictured himself at 17, considered his biggest worry or problem at the time, wishing he'd had a mightier bat, a faster glove, he remembered, to drive him toward his fantasy of living up to his name as a hot major league third baseman, and longing, lusting, for Sylvie. And that, he concluded, had been pretty much that. Some schoolwork stress, fights with the longed-for Sylvie, annoyance with parental demands and rules. But he'd had parents, family, home, friends, structure. He couldn't imagine what it had been like for her, being 17 and in constant fear for her life, witnessing cold-blooded murder, watching the man who'd given her a sense of security, even family, bleeding to death and trying so damn hard to obey his dying request. John Barrow told her to run, no question saving her life with the order, and she'd never stopped. He shifted, studying her while she slept. Time to stop running, he thought.
Time to trust someone to help, to make it right. Sergei and Ilya Volkov, Yakov Korotký, Alexei Guryevich. He needed to do some research on the players, or utilize Abigail's research. He imagined anything that was or could be known about them was in her files, and in her head. Marshals Cosgrove and Keegan, same deal. A dirty cop earned a cell shared by those he'd sent over, in Brooks's opinion. A dirty cop who killed another cop for profit or gain. There was a special circle of hell reserved for them. He wanted a part in putting Cosgrove and Keegan dead center of that circle. He had some ideas. Yeah, a few ideas on that. He wanted to chew on them some, do that research, let it all sift around. After a dozen years, a few days, even weeks of studying and formulating wouldn't hurt. And he expected she'd need some of that time to adjust to the new situation. He'd need it to convince her to let him do what needed to be done, once he'd settled on exactly what that would be. For now, he figured the best thing would be to cart her on up to bed. They could both sleep on it a while. He got up, started to lift her, and she kneed him dead in the balls. He swore he felt them tickle his throat, then stick there when her elbow jabbed his larynx. He felt his own eyes roll up and back as he dropped like a stone, airless.
Oh, God, Brooks, I'm sorry."
Since the only sound he could make was a wheeze, he gave it up after one attempt. He'd just lie there for the moment, maybe forever.
"I must have fallen asleep. You startled me."
She tried to turn him over, brushed his hair from his face. The dog licked it sympathetically.
"Can you breathe? Are you breathing? You're breathing."
He coughed, and that burned like fire to match the inferno raging in his crotch.
"Shit,"
he managed, and coughed again.
"I'm going to get you water and ice. Just take slow breaths."
She must have told the dog to stay with him, as Bert laid down so they were eye to eye.
"What the fuck?"
When that hissed out of him, Bert licked his face again. He managed to swallow, then roll cautiously to his hands and knees. He stayed there another moment, wondering if he'd complete the cycle and puke. He'd made it to sitting on the floor, stomach contents intact, when Abigail rushed back in with the cold pack and a glass of water.
"Don't you put that on my balls. It's bad enough."
He took the water, and though the first couple of sips ripped like drinking broken razor blades, the rawness slowly eased.
"What the fuck?"
he said again.
"It was reflex. I'm so sorry. You're so pale. I'm so sorry. I fell asleep, and I was back there at Alexei's. Ilya found me, and I think you touched me, and I thought it was Ilya, so I reacted."
"I'll say. God help him if he tries for you. We may never have kids now."
"A minor insult of this kind to the genitalia doesn't affect fertility," she began, then looked away. She went considerably pale herself. "I'm very sorry," she repeated.
"I'll live. Next time I start to carry you up to bed, I'll wear a cup. Now you may have to carry me."
"I'll help you." She kissed him gently on the cheek.
"I'd say that's not where it hurts, but if you kiss me where it does and I have the normal reaction, it may kill me."
He waved her away, pushed to his feet.
"It's not so bad."
He cleared his throat, winced.
"I'll help you upstairs."
"I've got it. I'm just going to check things out, for my own peace of mind."
"All right. I'll let Bert out before I come up."
When she came up, he'd stripped down to his boxers, but stood by her monitor, studying it. "Is everything,
Yeah, that's some aim you've got, killer."
"It's a particularly vulnerable area in a man."
"I can attest. I'm going to want you to show me how this system works sometime soon. How you switch from view to view, zoom in, pan out, and so on?
It's very simple. Do you want me to show you now?
Tomorrow's soon enough. I figure you've got plenty of data on the Volkovs and the agents in their pocket. I'm going to want to review that.
Yes.
He caught the tone. What?
I haven't told you everything.
Now would be a good time for that.
I'd like to clean up first.
Okay.
And get her thoughts together, he concluded. She took a nightshirt from the drawer. I'll just be a minute, she told him, and went into the bathroom. He wondered how much more there could be as he heard the water running, and decided there was no point in speculating. Instead, he turned down the bed, lowered the lights. When she came out, she got 2 bottles of water out of her cold box. She offered him one, then sat on the side of the bed. I think, if I were you, I'd wonder why I'd never tried to go to the authorities, tell everything that happened.
You didn't know who to trust.
That's true, at least initially, and I was afraid. For a long time I had nightmares and flashbacks, panic attacks. I still have occasional anxiety attacks. Well, you've seen. And even above that, though it took me time to understand it, I believed I had to do what John told me. He died protecting me. It all happened so quickly, so violently, and was so urgent, so insistent. I realize now we were both very much in the moment, and in that moment, my survival hinged on escape.
If you hadn't run, you'd be dead. That's clear.
Yes, I've never questioned that. In those first days, weeks, it was all panic. Get away, stay concealed. If the Volkovs found me, they'd kill me. If the authorities found me and they were involved with the Volkovs, they'd kill me. If they weren't involved, they might arrest me for murder. So I ran and I hid the way I told you.
No one could blame you for that.
Maybe not. I was young and traumatized. No matter what the intellect, 17 is still immature, undeveloped. But after some time had passed, I began to think more clearly, think beyond the moment. There had to be others like John and Terry, others who'd believe me, who'd listen, do whatever they could to protect me. How could I keep running, hiding? How could I do nothing when I was the only one who'd seen Julie's murder, who knew the truth of how John and Terry had died? So, I hacked into the FBI's and U.S. Marshals databases.
You can do that?
I do it routinely, but I learned a considerable amount in the first year or 2 after I went into hiding. Some from the boy I told you about, some on my own. I wanted to learn everything I could about Cosgrove and Keegan, about Linda Pesky, too. She'd called in sick that day. Was that true? Was she another Volkov mole? Her medical records showed she'd been treated for food poisoning, so...
You accessed her medical records?
I've broken many laws. You said sometimes it's necessary to break the law. He rubbed his forehead.
Yeah, I did. Let's put that on the shelf. You were, what, about 19 or 20 and capable of hacking into the files of government agencies?
I would have been a very good cyber investigator.
Law enforcement's loss.
I believed, and still believe, Linda Pesky wasn't part of it. I can't be sure even now, but there's nothing to indicate she was anything but a marshal in good standing. Retired now, married with 2 children. I suspect Cosgrove put something in her food to make her ill that day, but I can't prove it, and I didn't feel safe contacting her. I believed, and still believe, Detectives Griffith and Riley are good, honest police officers. But I hesitated, as they're Chicago police, not federal, and federal often takes over from the local police. Added to that, I worried I'd put their lives in danger. It seemed more productive, safer, to research and study. At the same time, I needed money. I had $15,000 when I ran, but there are expenses in flight, in generating documents, in transportation and clothing and so on. As my primary skill was in computers, I worked on programming.
I developed some software, sold it. It was lucrative.
Is that so?
Yes, and I developed a computer game, actually 3 connecting games. It was more lucrative.
What game?
It's called Street Wars. My research indicated most game players are male and enjoy battle or war-type games.
I've played that game.
Eyes narrowed, he pointed at her.
Russ and I used to have marathon tournaments whenever I came home from Little Rock. It's bloody and brutal, and really cool.
My target demographic enjoys brutal and bloody in their gaming. Having 3 was also key. If the first gains popularity, the target audience will want and pay for a follow-up. I was able to sell the 3-part package outright for a considerable amount. It seemed less complicated under my circumstances than a royalty-based contract.
You rich?
Yes, I have a great deal of money, which I add to with my current security business. He smiled at her.
I like having a rich girlfriend.
I've never been anyone's girlfriend.
Well, I'm sewing you into that, because you're rich.
He made her smile. You said you loved me before you knew I was rich. It's less complicated and stressful to relocate, to arrange private transportation if necessary, to equip and secure a new location if there's money. I didn't want to steal it.
And you could have.
Oh, yes, of course. I accessed Cosgrove's and Keegan's bank accounts, found what I believe are payments from the Volkoffs. I could have siphoned funds from them, even from the Volkoffs themselves.
Wait.
Now he held up a hand, circled around.
You've hacked into the Volkoffs' network?
Yes. I'll explain. I secured the money I made in several different accounts under various identifications. I felt safer, less afraid with money, and with the information I'd gathered. I wanted more time. I'd started to study a particular FBI agent. I wanted to follow her, review her files, reports, her evaluations for at least a year before contact. I'd moved to New York. I felt safe there. So many people, all so busy, too busy to pay attention to me. And by that time, I could work almost entirely out of my brownstone. She thought back on it, a bit wistfully. I had a very nice house in Soho. It was there I considered getting a dog, for security and companionship. I'd started my security business, and at that time dealt face-to-face with clients. I would go to them, evaluate their system, their needs.
When was this?
I located in New York 6 years ago. I was 23, but my identification claimed I was 26. Older is better in these cases. I started fairly small, designing and installing security systems for homes and small businesses, business computer networks. It gave me considerable time for my research. And in researching, I found the agent I felt might be the one. I wanted what I wanted at 16. Friends, relationships, normal. And I wanted to do the right thing for Julie, for John and Terry. I was there more than a year, the longest I'd stayed in one place. I thought about buying a home in the country, because I realized, though I enjoyed the convenience of the city, I preferred the quiet. But it felt safe there, in Soho, all those people, the busy pace, and I'd landed a big account, a law firm. I'd done the personal security for one of the associates, and he'd recommended me. 6 more months, I told myself. I'd stay in New York, complete the new contract, continue my research. Then, if I felt absolutely sure of this agent, I'd contact her and begin the process.
What happened?
I was nearly there, nearly ready. I'd completed the contract, and that had netted me another for one of the clients of the firm, my first corporation. It was good work, exhilarating, challenging. I believed absolutely my life was about to begin again. And I came out of the client's building, Houston Street, downtown. I was thinking how I'd go home, change, go to the market, and buy myself a good bottle of wine to celebrate. I was thinking the 6 months I'd set to contact the agent was nearly up. I was thinking of getting a dog, of where I'd want to live when I could really live again. I was thinking of anything but the Volkovs, and he was just there.
Who?
Ilya. Ilya Volkov, and another man, his cousin, I found out later. They got out of a car. Just as I started for the curb to hail a cab, I almost walked into him. All those people, all that city, and I nearly walked into the man I'd run from for nearly 8 years. He looked right at me, and I froze just as I had on the terrace that night. He started to smile, as a man does at a woman who's staring at him, I suppose. And then he knew me, and the smile went away.
He recognized you, are you sure?
He said my name. Liz, here you are. Just like that. He reached for me. He nearly had my arm. His fingers brushed my sleeve before I jerked away, and I ran. He came after me. I heard him shouting in Russian. I heard the car gun away from the curb. I thought, he'll shoot me in the back, or catch me and drag me into that car. She pressed a hand to her heart, rubbed it there as the beat began to thud as it had that day in New York. I ran into the street. It was crazy. I was nearly run over. I didn't care. Anything would be better. I lost my shoes. It was like that night again, running in my bare feet. But I was smarter now. Panicked at first, but more prepared. I knew the streets, I'd studied them, and I'd pulled away when I'd run into traffic and his driver couldn't make the turn. I don't know how far I'd run before I realized I'd gotten away. I got on a crosstown bus, then I got in a cab. Too warm now, she thought, and crossed to a window to open it. I didn't have any shoes, but no one seemed to notice or care. It was a benefit of a large city.
I guess I'm a country boy, as that doesn't strike me as a benefit.
It was that day. When I got home, I got out my go bag. I would have run again with only that, but I calmed down, packed up what I felt I'd need. I wasn't sure how much time I had, if he'd seen which building I'd come out of, if he'd managed to dig out the name I was using, find my address. I kept a car in another name in a garage. It was, I'd thought, worth the expense, and it proved to be true. I called a private car service, had it take me to the garage. They might trace me there, but that would take time. By then, I'd be gone. I'd buy a new car, change my ID.
Where did you go?
I stayed mobile for weeks. Motels, paid cash. I watched Ilya's email. I learned they hadn't been able to trace me for several days. I didn't have to leave so quickly after all. And they weren't able to trace me once I left the brownstone. No one had seen or paid attention to me leaving. But I learned a lesson. I'd gotten careless. I'd let myself plan for a normal life, even in some way to live one. They'd never stop coming after me, so I had to accept the way it was, and do what I could to get justice for John and Terry and Julie another way. I'm tied in to the Volkovs network. Email, e-files, even text messaging. When I have something that seems worthwhile, I leak the data anonymously to the FBI agent I studied and cleared to my specifications. I don't know how much longer it'll be safe to use her as a contact. If Volkov's people connect her, they may eliminate her. I think, logically, they'd try to use her to find the source of the leaks before they eliminate her. But that may be worse. They could torture her, and she couldn't tell them because she doesn't know. I'd be safe, but she wouldn't. Neither will you, if you involve yourself.
You'd have made a good cop, cyber or otherwise, to my way of thinking. But I am a cop. You're just a cop's rich girlfriend.
Don't joke. If they connect you to me in any way, they'll kill you. But not just you, they'll kill your family. Your mother, your father, your sisters, their children, everyone you care about.
I'll take care of my family, Abigail. I guess we'll stick with Abigail for now.
He stroked a hand over her hair.
I'll have to get used to Liz when this is finished.
It's never going to be finished.
You're wrong. I want you to promise me something.
To keep their eyes level, he shifted his hand to cup her chin. I want your word on this. You won't run out on me. You won't run figuring you're doing what's best for me and mine. I don't want to make a promise I might break. Your word. I'm going to trust your word, and you're going to trust mine. You promise me that, and I'll promise you I won't do anything without your full knowledge and approval. That's no easy promise for me to make, but I'll make it. You won't do anything unless I agree? That's my promise. Now, I want yours. You won't run. What if they find me, the way Ilya did in New York? If you have to run, you run to me. You're like John. They killed John because he didn't know what was coming. Now, if you look me in the eyes and tell me you're seriously worried the Russian mafia is going to infiltrate the Bickford Police Department, we'll pack up Bert and whatever else we need and head out tonight. Name the place. I don't think that. Good. Then promise me. You won't do anything without telling me. I won't run without telling you. I guess that's close enough. You've had enough for tonight. We're going to get some sleep. I'm going to think about all this. I may have more questions, but they can wait. And after I've thought on it a while, we'll talk about what we'll do. That's we. You're not alone anymore. You're not going to be alone anymore. He urged her into bed, pulling her close after he turned off the light. There, that feels right. Maybe I do have one question for tonight. All right. Did you hack into our system at the station? She sighed, and in the dark didn't see him smile at the sound. I felt it was important to know details about local law enforcement. The security on your network isn't very good. Maybe I should talk to the selectmen about hiring you to fix that. I'm very expensive, but under the circumstances I could offer you a large discount on my usual fee. She sighed again. I'd secure your personal computer for free. Jesus! He had to laugh. You're in my personal email and all that? I'm sorry, you kept coming here and asking questions. You'd looked up information on me. Well, the information I generated, but it was disturbing. I guess it was. You should be careful, calling the current mayor a fuckwit, even in correspondence with your good friend. You can't be sure who might see your personal email. He is a fuckwit, but I'll keep that in mind. He turned his head, kissed the top of her head. I love you. She pressed her face to the side of his throat. It sounds lovely in bed, in the dark, when everything's quiet. Because it's true. And it'll be true in the morning. She closed her eyes, held the words to her as he held her, and hoped, in the morning, he'd give them to her again. Elizabeth. Let justice be done, though the heavens fall. Lord Mansfield. Chapter 23. Roland Babbitt checked into the Inn of the Ozarks on a spring afternoon that simmered hot and close as August. In his room, with its engaging view of the hills, he set up his laptop on the glossy old desk. He appreciated the amenities, the complimentary Wi-Fi, the flat-screen TV, the carefully, he imagined, selected furnishings, and the generous shower. A great deal of the time he worked out of crap motels with piss-trickle showers and stingy slivers of soap, or out of his car, where the facilities ran to a mason jar he could empty of urine periodically. Such was the life of a private investigator. He enjoyed it, even the crap motels and mason jars. 2 years as a cop had taught him he didn't work all that well with rules and regs. But he'd been a pretty good cop, and that had segued into a job with Steuben Price Investigations. In the nearly 10 years he'd worked there, he'd proven himself reliable, inventive, and dogged, qualities appreciated by the firm. He also enjoyed his bonuses and hoped to net another on this job. He unpacked cargo shorts and pants, tees, sweats, rough boots. He'd selected the wardrobe to go with his cover as a freelance photographer, one that would allow him to wander the town, the outskirts, take photographs, talk to locals. He didn't like the client. Roland considered Lincoln Blake a first-degree asshole, and the fruit of Blake's loins a raw pimple on society's ass. But work was work, and Blake generated a lot of income, being a nosy, pushy, scheming first-degree asshole. When the boss said go, Roland went, especially since he had one kid in private school, another who'd enroll in the fall, and, surprise, a third on the way. He loved his family, and the pay from Steuben Price plus bonuses gave them a good life, which included a hefty mortgage on their new 4-bedroom in West Little Rock. So, asshole or not, the client was king. If Blake wanted to know all there was to know, especially the dirt, on one Abigail Lowry, Roland would find out all there was to know. The same for Brooks Gleason, Bickford's police chief and, according to the client, Lowry's lover. The client claimed the two in question, along with the Conroys, the owners of the hotel with the very nice view and amenities, had set up his son in order to extort money. Blake fervently and loudly denied his boy had caused the extensive damage to the hotel's premier suite as claimed, nor had he assaulted Russell Conroy, nor had he pulled a knife on the chief of police. Roland, nobody's fool, fervently but quietly believed the butt pimple had done all that and more. But he'd do his job, earn his salary, and pay his bills. He checked his camera gear, his recorder, his notebook, and lockpicks, then called his wife on his cell phone to let her know he'd arrived safe and sound. He told her he wished she were there, and meant it. The room boasted a King 4-poster. Pregnancy turned Jen into a sexual dynamo. As he packed up for his first walk about town, he promised himself he'd make a return trip, with Jen, after the baby came and her parents were still dazzled enough to take on 3 kids for a long weekend. He shouldered the camera bag, hung the Nikon around his neck on a strap decorated with peace signs. Wearing cargo shorts, Rockports, and an REM t-shirt, he slipped on sunglasses, checked himself out in the mirror. He hadn't shaved that morning, deliberately, and thought the scruff added to the look. He liked pulled-on personas and, given the choice, kept them fairly close to his own. Natural. Easy. He considered himself to be a personable guy. He could talk to anyone about anything, as vital a tool as his computer. He wasn't bad-looking, he thought, as he added a green-piece ball cap to his ensemble. Though he was starting to worry about male pattern baldness. His brother, only 2 years older than Roland's 34, already showed a fist-sized patch of bare scalp at the crown of his head. He thought fleetingly of picking up some Rogaine. Why not try preemptive measures, as he walked out of his room? He'd wrangled a room on the top floor, though the reservation clerk had offered another due to construction noise, but he'd brushed off the warning and inconvenience. This way, he should be able to get a look at the suite the client's son hadn't trashed, if you believed first-class assholes. He strolled down the hall, noted the door, firmly shut, a sign apologizing for the inconvenience due to unexpected repairs. The noise, somewhat muffled, sounded more like demo than repair. He'd check it out later, when the crew and staff weren't around. For now, he took the stairs down, since he was also mildly concerned about encroaching middle-aged paunch, and walked outside into the heat. Pretty little town, he thought. Jen would like it. The shops, the art. He'd pick up something for her and the kids, including the as-yet unnamed and unknown surprise, before he left. Plenty of tourists, he noted. A guy with a camera blended right in. He made use of it, taking a few shots of the hotel, zooming in on the windows of the suite in question, with their curtains tightly shut. He had a good eye for a picture. He thought when the time came to retire from private investigating, he'd try photography as a working hobby. He wandered, framed in, shot. An interesting window, a close-up of flowers in a half-whiskey barrel. To the casual eye, he'd look like someone meandering without specific destination. But he had the salient addresses in his head. Lowry's place would require a drive, but he could walk past the police chief's apartment and the house where his parents still lived. Just getting a feel for the place, the people, Roland thought, and spent some time studying the windows of Brooks Gleason's apartment above a busy diner. Shades up, he noted. Nothing to see here. He wandered around the back, took some pictures of flower pots as he studied the rear entrance. Decent locks, but nothing major, should he feel the need to do a little snooping inside. He'd avoid that, if possible. With the town map in his hand, courtesy of the hotel, he strolled down the sidewalk. And stopped, absolutely charmed and bedazzled by the mural house. He checked the address and confirmed it was indeed the residence of the police chief's parents. Information already gathered told him the mother was an artist, the father a high school teacher. He had to assume the woman with the rainbow kerchief over her hair, currently standing on scaffolding in paint-splattered bib overalls, was the subject's mother. Leashed to the base of the scaffolding, a puppy curled in the shade and snoozed. As much for his own interest as the job, Roland took a few pictures, moved closer. When he got to the edge of the yard, the puppy woke in a yappy frenzy, and the woman looked down. She tipped her head. "Help you?" "I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just walking around and... This is just amazing. Did you paint all of this?" "I did. Visiting?" "I'm spending a few days in town. I'm a photographer, and I'm taking a few weeks in the Ozarks. I want to put a show together." "You won't lack for subject matter around here." "All right, Plato, I'm coming." She climbed down nimbly, unclipped the dog, who instantly raced over to sniff at Roland. "Good dog." He hunkered down to give the dog a rub. "I guess I woke him up. He's a fierce guard dog, as you can see." "Sonny O'Hara," she added, offering a hand dotted with paint. "Roland Babbitt. Would it be all right if I took some pictures of the house? It's wonderful." "You go ahead. Where are you from, Roland?" "Little Rock. My son lived there some years. He was a police detective, Brooks Gleason." "Can't say I know the name, but I try to stay out of trouble." She grinned along with him. "That's good, because he's chief of police here now." "It feels like a nice town. I hope he doesn't stay too busy." "Oh, well, there's always this and that. Where are you staying?" "I'm splurging, since I'll do a lot of camping on the second part of this trip. I'm at the Inn of the Ozarks." "Couldn't do better. It's one of the brightest jewels in Bickford's treasure box. We had some trouble there a few days ago, as it happens. Town troublemaker and a couple of his minions tore up the Ozark suite." "Is that what it is? I'm on that floor, and they told me there'd be some noise. Repairs going on." "A lot of them. You may want to get yourself on another floor." "Oh, I don't mind it. I can sleep through anything." Casual and friendly, he let his camera dangle by its strap. "I'm sorry to hear about the trouble, though. It's a really beautiful hotel. The architecture, the furnishings, it has the feel of a family home, with benefits. Why'd they tear it up?" "Some people just like to break things, I guess." "That's a shame. I guess even nice little towns have troublemakers. I'll try to steer clear of him while I'm here." "He's in jail, and likely to be there a while. You'll find most people who live here are friendly. We depend on tourists and artists like yourself. That's a serious camera you've got there." "My baby." He tapped it. He really wanted the pictures, nearly as much as the information she so breezily passed on. I still do film now and then, but digital's my primary choice. If you get anything you want to sell, you can take it into Shop Street Gallery. They buy a lot of local photography. I appreciate the tip. A couple sales will keep me in hot dogs and beans for the next few weeks. He chatted with her for a few more minutes, then walked back toward the center of town. If Sonny O'Hara was anything to go by, Roland thought, the client wasn't going to be pleased with the report. He headed for the diner. Diners and waitresses were usually good information sources. He chose a booth with a good view of the comings and goings, set his camera carefully on the tabletop. He was tempted to take a picture of the waitress. He really did love saturating himself in the persona, and she had a good, interesting face. Coffee, please. How about some pie to go with it? Cherry's especially good today. Cherry pie? He thought of encroaching middle-aged paunch. So he'd do 50 extra crunches tonight. I don't think I can say no. Warmed up, vanilla bean ice cream? Okay, 75 extra crunches. Yes, ma'am. I don't know anybody strong enough to say no to that. If it's as good as it sounds, I'm going to be in here every day while I'm in town. It is. Visitin'? She said, in nearly the same easy tone as Sonny. He gave her the same cover, even showed her a few pictures he'd taken of the mural house. You never know what she'll paint on it next. Those are right nice pictures, too. Thanks. I'll put your order in. He doctored his coffee while he waited, studied his guidebook like a good tourist. She brought back a generous wedge of pie with ice cream gently melting on the laced crust. Sounds good, looks good. Roland forked off a bite. Tastes even better. Thanks, Kim. You enjoy now. She glanced over, and so did he, as Brooks walked in. Hey there, Chief. When she gestured to the booth directly in front of him, Roland decided to double her tip. Just coffee. You ain't heard about the cherry pie a la mode. I got it on good authority, nobody can say no. She sent Roland a wink as she spoke, and he toasted her with a forkful. It'd be wasted on me right now. Lawyers. Well, sweetie, that calls for 2 scoops of vanilla bean on the pie. Next time. I just came in for a decent cup of coffee and some breathing room to review my notes. All right, then. Blake's lawyers? She asked as she poured the coffee. New ones. Harry got the axe, and between you and me, I think he's doing a dance of joy at the firing. Blake hired on a firm from up north. Yankee lawyers? Kim's mouth twisted in derision. I shouldn't be surprised. Armani suits and Louis Vuitton briefcases, at least according to the paralegal Big John Simpson's got doing research on the case. They've got motions on top of motions. Want to change a venue for one thing. The judge doesn't like them, so that's something. Want to get him away from here, away from where people know what a nasty piece of work that Blake boy is. Can't say I blame them. But here or on Pluto, fact's fact. The trouble is, facts aren't always enough in a courtroom. On one step back, she slapped both fists on her hips. You don't think he'll get off? Not after what he did. I'm not going to think it, because if he gets out of this whistling, the next time I know in my gut he's likely to kill somebody. Well, my Jesus, Brooks. Sorry. Brooks rubbed at his tired eyes. I should have taken my crappy mood to my office. You sit right there and have your coffee and don't let all this weigh on you. She leaned down, kissed the top of his head. You did your job, and everybody knows it. You can't do more than your job. Feels like I ought to. Anyway, just the coffee. You holler if you want anything else. Shaking her head, she walked away, topping off Roland's coffee as she went. Roland sat, mulling. Nothing the cop said struck him as false. He despised the nasty piece of work himself, but as the wise and wonderful Kim had said, you couldn't do more than your job. His was to find anything that might tip the scales in the client's favor. He nearly choked on his pie when the vision walked in. He knew small southern towns could produce some beauties, and in his personal opinion, southern women had a way of nurturing that beauty like hothouse roses. Maybe it was the weather, the air, the chance to wear all those thin summer dresses like the one the Vision wore now. Maybe it was the slower pace, or some secret mothers passed to daughters. Whatever it was, it worked. He loved his wife and had never, in their 12 years together, 10+ with rings on the finger, strayed. But a man was entitled to a little fantasy now and then when possibly the sexiest woman ever created sashayed into his line of sight. She hip-swayed right up to Gleason's booth, slid in like melted butter on warm toast. Not a good time, Sylvie. In Roland's world, it was always a good time for Sylvie.
I just have a question. I'm not going to try to get you back or anything like that. I learned my lesson back in March.
I appreciate that, but it's a bad time right here and now.
You look tense and tired and out of sorts. I'm sorry about that. We were friends once.
When he didn't speak, she looked away, let out a breath that had her delectable breasts rising, falling.
I guess we weren't friends, and maybe that's my fault. I've been doing a lot of thinking since I humiliated myself for your benefit.
Let's not go there.
It's easy for you to say, since you weren't the one standing there naked.
Roland felt himself going hard and mentally apologized to his wife.
It was a mistake, and some of it's on me for not talking it out with you. You're sorry, I'm sorry, let's forget it.
I can't forget it until I know.
Know what?
Why her and not me? That's all. I need to know why you want to be with Abigail Lowry. Everybody knows you are. And you don't want to be with me.
Roland wanted to know too, and not just for the client. He'd seen Lowry's photo, and she was attractive, sure, pretty, maybe even beautiful in a quiet sort of way. But next to the stupendous Sylvie, she was no cherry pie a la mode.
I don't know how to tell you.
Just tell me the truth. Is she better in bed than me?
Jesus Christ.
That's the wrong thing to ask.
On an impatient gesture, she pushed back a glorious fall of hair.
I wasn't going to ask, even though I wonder. Just give me something, will you, that I can understand?
She makes me happy. When I'm with her, I feel like that's where I'm supposed to be, where I've been wanting to be, and everything that matters makes sense. I don't know why one person falls in love with another, Sylvie, they just do.
You're in love with her.
I'm in love with her.
She stared down at the tabletop for a moment.
Can I have a sip of your coffee?
Sure.
She took it, grimaced, set it down again after one sip.
You always drink it too sweet.
Bad habit.
Did you ever love me?
I wanted you. There were times I craved you like I was starved to death. The first time around, we were too young to know. The second, maybe we were both trying to know. I couldn't make you happy, you couldn't make me happy, and nothing that really mattered made sense.
The sex did.
He laughed a little.
Okay, you're right about that. But sex, even good sex, can't be the start, finish, and the whole in between.
I thought I'd figured that out after my first divorce, but I guess I didn't. And the second one, I never wanted to be the kind of woman with 2 divorces on her back.
She turned to stare out the wide window.
But I am.
Maybe you should think of it as 2 marriages. I figure people who try marriage more than once, they're optimists.
Optimists.
With a half laugh, she shoved his coffee away. Sounds better than a loser. You're not a loser, Sylvie.
I'm sort of seeing Grover.
Oh. Brooks picked up his coffee, gulped some down. Well.
I know, he's not the type I usually aim for. He's not handsome, and he's a little paunchy, but he's got a sweetness to him. You did, too, but I didn't appreciate it. I'm appreciating his. We're not sleeping together yet, but I feel good when I'm with him. I feel better about myself. I guess we're friends, the way you and I never were.
That's good.
He makes me happy, and I didn't expect to be. I guess I'll find out if I can stay happy.
I hope you can.
So do I. She slid out. I don't think I'm ready to say I hope you stay happy with Abigail Lowry, but I nearly am.
That's a start.
I'll see you around.
She sashayed out. Roland decided he had a lot more mulling to do, but since he'd finished his pie, he needed to do it elsewhere. In any case, Gleason was leaving, laying money on the tabletop for the coffee. Maybe he'd drive out toward Lowry's place, get the lay of the land. Taking a break from work, Abigail paged through recipes online. It kept her from worrying. Nearly kept her from worrying. She knew Brooks would want to talk about what happened next when he came. She worried about what he thought should happen next. So she worked, did laundry, worked, weeded the garden, worked, looked through recipes. She couldn't seem to settle, focus on one chore until she completed it. It wasn't like her. She wished he'd come. She wished she could be alone. She wished she knew what she really wished. She hated this indecision, the gnawing anxiety. It wasn't productive. When her alarm sounded, she spun in her chair, certain that telling Brooks, telling anyone, the story had brought the Volkoffs to her door. Illogical. Actually ridiculous, she admitted, but her pulse hammered as she watched the man in the ball cap on her monitor. A good camera, she noted, boots that had seen some wear, a backpack. A hiker or tourist who'd wandered onto her property despite the postings. That was it, probably. When he took out binoculars, aimed them toward her cabin, the anxiety increased. Who was he? What was he doing? Coming closer. Still closer. He stopped again, scanned with his compact field glasses, turning slowly until it seemed to Abigail he stared through them right at one of the cameras. Then he continued on, continuing the circle. He took off his cap, scrubbed at his hair before taking out a water bottle and drinking deeply. Reaching into his pocket, he took out a compass, took a step, stumbled. He fumbled with the compass, dropped it. She saw his mouth move as he dived for it, snatched it off the ground. He shook it, lifted his face to the sky, then sat on the ground, dropped his head to his knees. He stayed as he was for several moments before pushing to his feet. He mopped at his face, then continued toward her cabin. After checking her weapon, Abigail took the dog outside, circled around. She could hear him coming. Nothing stealthy in his approach, she thought, and he was muttering to himself, breathing fast, heavy. From the side of the greenhouse, she watched him come into view, heard him say very clearly, "Thank God," as he arrowed straight toward her rear door. He knocked, swiped sweat from his face, waited. He knocked again, more forcefully. "Hello? Is anybody there? Please let somebody be there." He walked down the porch, cupped his hand on the window glass. And she stepped out, the dog by her side. "What do you want?" He jumped like a rabbit, spun around. "Geez, you scared the—" His eyes went huge when he saw the gun, and his hands shot straight up in the air.
Jesus, don't shoot me. I'm lost. I got lost. I'm just looking for the way back to my car.
What were you doing in the woods, on my property? It's clearly posted.
I'm sorry. I was taking photographs. I'm a photographer. I was just going to take a few shots, get the feel of things, and I got caught up, went in farther than I meant to. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have ignored the no trespassing signs. You can call the cops. Just don't shoot me. My name's Roland Babbitt. I'm staying at the Inn of the Ozarks. You can check.
Please take off your pack, set it down, step away from it.
Okay, sure.
He wasn't wearing a gun. She'd seen him do a full circle and would have spotted it, but he might have a weapon in the pack.
You can keep the pack, he said when he set it down. My wallet's in there. You can keep the money.
I don't want your money.
Listen. I got lost. I dropped my compass and broke it. I saw the cabin through my binoculars when I was scanning around. I just came for some help. Call the police.
Where did you leave your car?
If I knew, I wouldn't be lost. I don't mean to be a smartass, he added quickly. I drove out of Bickford, south out of town for about a mile, then I pulled over. The light was really good, the shadows. I wanted to take some shots. Photographs, I mean, he said, with another wary look at the gun.
You should respect private property.
Yes, you're right. I'm really sorry.
She pointed. If you go that way, you'll come to the road. Turn left. You should find your car in about a quarter mile.
Okay, thanks. I'll just...
Take your pack, she told him, as he started to step off the porch without it.
Okay.
He picked it up, his eyes shifting from her face to the gun, to the dog, back again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. She watched him walk away, in quite a hurry, until he was out of sight. Back in the house, she continued to watch him on the monitor as he hiked at a half-jog up her road to the main one, tossing glances over his shoulders every few minutes. She'd frightened him, she thought. Well, he'd frightened her. She supposed that made them even. Roland knew exactly where his car was parked. He hadn't been expecting the gun. He hadn't been expecting the cameras either. He'd been told she had security, including cameras around the house. Nobody had mentioned she had them ranged back in the woods. If he hadn't spotted one when he had, he'd have blown the job. She'd bought the scared lost hiker routine. Why not? He had been scared. She'd held the Glock like someone who knew how to use it. Like someone who would use it. He had to admire that, now that he wasn't standing on the wrong side of it. And the dog. He'd known about the dog, but god damn, that was one big bastard. Then the locks on the back door. As good as they came, he mused, as he tossed the pack in the back seat. He was pretty damn good with the picks, but he'd never get through those. Moot point, as he couldn't get by the cameras, not without a whole lot of equipment. That much security? Overkill. The job just got a lot more interesting. Anybody with security like that, the big dog, the Glock, the Tude, she had something to hide. He loved finding out what people wanted to hide. Chapter 24. Brooks came into the kitchen with a clutch of white daisies with bright yellow buttons and a rawhide bone for Bert.
You brought me flowers again.
My daddy brings my mama flowers once or twice a week, and I figured out it's because they make her smile, just like you are now.
I worried things wouldn't be right when you came tonight, that it would feel awkward after everything, and you brought me daisies.
Then you can stop worrying.
She got a vase, wished she had a pretty little pitcher instead, and vowed to buy one the next time she went into town.
Every time I come in here, something smells good, in addition to you.
It's the rosemary, she told him as she arranged the flowers. It's very fragrant. I found a new recipe for chicken I wanted to try.
Happy to be your taste tester.
It should go well with the pouilly fumé.
If you say so.
He brushed her hair back, then indulged himself with a nuzzle of her neck.
How'd your day go?
I was restless and distracted, but I finished some work, and I was interrupted by a lost hiker, a photographer. I don't understand why people don't respect boundary lines. There's so much land here open to the public, there's no need to come onto private property.
Grass is always greener. He came to the house?
Yes, he set off the alarm and I saw him on the monitor. He dropped and broke his compass and apparently saw the cabin through his binoculars. Brooks paused in the act of pouring their wine.
Binoculars?
She checked the chicken. Yes, I wondered if he'd seen the camera through them, but apparently he was looking for his way or some help. I went outside around the greenhouse so I could come up behind him.
You went out? When some strange guy was coming to the house?
I know how to take care of myself. I've been doing it for a long time, remember? He was alone. I had my gun and Bert. He knocked, called out, and he was very disconcerted when I stepped out with the gun. Brooks finished pouring the wine, took a long swallow.
Yeah, I can see that.
I didn't mind frightening him. He shouldn't have come onto posted property. I questioned him briefly, then directed him to where, if he told me accurately, he'd left his car. He left quickly.
An armed woman with a big dog? He'd have been a fool not to. What was he doing out here?
Photography. He said his name was Roland Babbitt, and he was staying at the Conroy's Hotel.
That's easy enough to check on.
Brooks dug out his cell phone.
What did he look like?
Mid-30s, between 5'10" and 5'11", about 170 pounds. Medium complexion, light brown hair, brown eyes, prominent chin. He wore a brown cap with the Greenpeace logo, a black t-shirt with the name of the band, REM, khaki cargo shorts, and hiking boots. He had a navy backpack and a Nikon camera on a strap. The strap had multicolored peace signs on it.
Yeah, you would have made a good cop, Brooks replied. I saw him at the diner earlier today. Cherry pie a la mode.
What does that mean?
Nothing, just curious. What time did he come here?
The alarm sounded at 4:18.
Yeah, that's curious. I see him at the diner in town going on to 4 o'clock. Less than a half hour later, he's out here.
Her hand tightened on the stem of her glass. You think they found me?
Honey, did he look like Russian mafia? And would it be their style to have some guy poking around up in your woods?
No. Her shoulders relaxed. He wasn't armed. At least he wasn't wearing a weapon. The Volkovs wouldn't send a single unarmed man.
I think that's a pretty safe bet.
But he intended to be thorough and punched in a number on his cell.
Hey, Darla, how's it going? Uh-huh. Those spring colds can hit hard. You get some rest. Yeah, it's that time of year, all right. Listen, do you have a guest name of Roland Babbitt registered? No problem. Uh-huh. It takes all kinds, doesn't it? Uh-huh.
He rolled his eyes at Abigail.
Yeah, Roland Babbitt. What room's he in? Now, Darla, I'm not just anybody asking. I'm the chief of police. I'm just following up on something. You know I can call Russ and ask. Uh-huh.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm. No, no trouble. Just a routine thing. You take care of that cold now, you hear? Bye.
He picked up the wine again.
Darla tends to run on a bit. He's there, all right. Took a room, requested it, right down the hall from the Ozark suite.
The one Justin Blake and his friends vandalized?
That would be right. Now, isn't it curious how I saw this Babbitt in town, and he comes here, got a camera and binoculars, and he's staying down from that particular suite?
It could be a coincidence, but it feels designed.
Designed is a good word for it. Designed by Blake. Leaning a hip on the counter, he picked up his wine. What do you bet if I scratched the surface some, I'd find out Roland Babbitt is a high-priced private investigator?
I think I'd win the bet. He did see the camera, and he thought very quickly, pretending to be lost. Duping her, she thought, with considerable annoyance. But I don't see what he gained by coming here.
A little legwork. Check out your setup here, get a feel. He had some luck today spotting one of your cameras, using it to his advantage to make contact. I don't doubt the reception gave him a bad moment, but all in all it worked for him. He had a conversation, a close-up look. Same thing earlier when I happened to go in for some coffee when he was in the diner. He got to sit there, eating his pie, and get a good look and... Shit.
I'm sorry?
I bet his ears were trained too. I bet he caught damn near every word of my conversation with Sylvie. Which I wasn't going to bring up, he added when Abigail said nothing. And now it occurs to me that was the wrong way because, I guess, it was an important conversation, and you were part of it.
You talked about me with her?
And that tone, that look in your eye was why I wasn't going to mention it.
I don't know what you mean. She turned away to put the green beans she'd bought earlier in the week and had already prepped on the stove to steam. I don't have a tone.
You could cut brick with it. Not that I mind.
He didn't bother to hide the grin when he gave her a friendly poke at the base of the spine.
It's sort of flattering.
I wouldn't be flattered. I don't care to have you talk about me with your former connection.
Connect is what Sylvie and me never really did. She came in while I was having coffee, and she sat down, partly to apologize for that, we'll say, unfortunate incident back in March. The other was to ask a question. She wanted to know why you and not her.
Considering, Abigail took the chicken off the heat. It's a legitimate question from her point of view. That's what you'd think. From mine, it's both awkward and annoying. A woman who looks like she does would be used to having anyone she wants and wouldn't see me, fairly enough, in that same light. However true that might be, it's still annoying. You're flattered because I'm annoyed, and that only annoys me more.
Before you move to downright pissed, don't you want to know what I told her?
It's none of my business what you said in a private conversation. She got out plates, set them down sharply. Yes, I want to know.
I told her that when I'm with you, it feels right. It feels like where I'm supposed to be. It all makes sense. I said I didn't know why one person falls in love with another, just that they do.
She turned back, eyes on his. You told her you loved me.
I did, because I do.
I'm less annoyed.
Good. Heading in the right direction. I didn't want to have the conversation with her, but after I had, I realized it was a good one. I think we understand each other better than we ever did, and that'll make it easier for both of us.
It would be easier for me if she weren't so physically gifted. And that's petty. I don't like being petty and shallow.
As I grew up with two sisters, I can safely say odds are strong she's thinking the same about you. But my point is, this Roland Babbitt got himself an earful.
None of it's applicable to the charges against Justin Blake, if indeed Babbitt is a private investigator working for Justin's father.
No, but it's fuel. Just like you carrying a gun and having high-class security is fuel. How well will those bona fides of yours hold up?
My documents and available history will stand up to a standard police run. There would be no reason to question them.
A PI is not a cop, Brooks pointed out.
I believe they'll hold up to a rigorous check. I've never had any trouble.
Ever been arrested? Brought in for questioning?
No, but I'm routinely checked by clients before contract. Due to the sensitive nature of the work and my fee, my documents and references are thoroughly checked by any new client.
good.
Satisfied, he nodded.
That's good to know. My concern, and it's just a concern at this point, is that Babbitt wouldn't be working for a client wanting to hire you, but one looking for dirt, for something he can use to discredit you or threaten you.
He'd have to be very skilled and very determined.
Maybe we'll take some precautions.
You could intimidate him. You have authority and weapons. You could confront him, intimidate him, and make him leave.
Maybe I could, but that's the sort of thing that would tend to make him more curious once he's gone. Unless I have a lever.
I don't want to leave.
We're not going to let that happen.
She hated this new stress, this additional complication that had nothing to do with the Volkoffs. If I stayed in the house, not answered the door, or simply given him directions,
I don't think that would have made much difference. He's doing a job. What we'll do, or you will, as I expect you're better and quicker, is find out what we can about him, see what kind of man we're up against here. Meanwhile, I'm going to want to borrow some of your cameras.
Why?
That precaution. Is it okay if the Bickford Police Department borrows some of your equipment for a day or two?
Yes. She took a key ring out of her pocket. Borrow what you want.
Thanks. I'll have Ash or Boyd run out and get it, if that's okay. I need to make a couple calls to set up that precaution.
All right. I have to finish the meal. Hopefully it would settle her nerves. I don't want to overcook the vegetables. She had to do something, keep doing something, so the panic couldn't push through. If she performed normal tasks, add fresh thyme and butter to the green beans, drizzle the wine sauce over the chicken, plate them with the roasted potatoes, she could cling to the illusion of normality. She'd prepared and presented the meal very well, but she could barely force down a few bites. She had a contingency plan. She always did. All the documents she needed for the next identity were inside her safe room, locked away, waiting. But she didn't want to use them, didn't want to become someone else again. That meant she'd have to fight to protect who she was now, what she had now. If this investigator is very skilled and very determined, it will still take time for him to discredit my documents and history, she began. I need more time to plan and organize any sort of contact with Special Agent Garrison.
She's in Chicago?
I wanted someone in Chicago, where the Volkoffs are based. She would have more incentive and more access. Her response time would be quicker once she learned to trust my information.
Good thinking.
But unless I can formulate an alternative, if I make direct contact, she'd be duty-bound to detain me. If that happens, I don't believe I'll have the time or opportunity to clear myself before I'm eliminated. He reached over, took both her hands.
You're not going to be detained, and you're sure as hell not going to be eliminated. Look at me. Whatever it takes. And I've given some thought on alternatives and methods.
I've considered sending Special Agent Garrison an email on her personal account, telling her who I am, relating the entire story, all the details. I can route it as I do the data I send her, and it wouldn't be possible to track, but it could leak. If the information I give her gets in the wrong hands, the Volkoffs will know I'm not only still alive.
Ilya Volkov saw you. They know you're alive.
They knew I was alive 5 years ago in New York. I might have had an accident or contracted a terminal illness.
Okay, slim, but point taken.
They'll also know I've accessed their accounts, their electronics, and have given information to the FBI. Naturally, they'd take steps to block me from the access, which would cost me time and effort. They'd also be much more careful about what they put in emails and e-files. But more, it would make them very angry, and increase their effort to locate and eliminate me. They have very skilled techs. Part of their income is from computer fraud, scams from identity theft.
You're better than their techs.
Yes, I am, but I've also had considerable time to study and program, to break through firewalls, elude alerts.
It would take time to do that again, with newer, stronger security in place. In their position, I'd lay traps. If I made a mistake, they might track me. Time, again, is important. If and when I contact the FBI, the process of taking Keegan and Cosgrove, identifying other moles, arresting Korotky, Ilya, all of that would have to happen quickly.
Like dominoes falling, he suggested.
Yes, along those lines. Bureaucracies don't, in general, operate in a timely fashion, and before the process can begin, the agent, her superiors, would have to believe me.
They will.
The word of a fugitive, suspected at least by some of killing or certainly causing the deaths of 2 U.S. Marshals, against the word of 2 other Marshals, one of whom has been decorated and promoted. He covered her restless hand with his.
The word of a woman who at 16 handed them a top-level mafia assassin on a damn platter. They're the ones who screwed up.
You're biased because you love me.
I love you, but I also have good instincts. You think the FBI, the Marshals, the CPD wouldn't bend and twist to break the back of the Volkov organization? They'll deal with you, Abigail.
It took an effort not to pull her hand from his. Are you asking me to trust them to protect me?
No. I'm asking you to trust yourself and me to do that.
I think I could.
Then what we need is, first, a conduit.
I don't understand.
Someone to speak for you, to make contact and open the door to negotiations.
You can't.
No, he agreed before she'd finished. I can't. I'm too close to you, emotionally and geographically. They'll check out the conduit. But they'd have no reason to connect me, or you, to my former captain on the Little Rock PD.
I don't know him.
I do. Just hear me out. Captain Joseph Anson. You can research him. He's a solid cop, decorated, a 25-year man. He's got a wife, first and only, 2 kids. He's a good boss, a smart cop. By the book, but not so much that he can't skip a page if it's the right thing to do. He's trusted and respected in the department because he's trustworthy and respectable. And he's got balls.
She got up, walked to the window to think it through. A conduit made good sense, would lay a reasonable buffer down. But why would he believe me?
He'll believe me.
Even if he did, why would Special Agent Garrison believe him?
Because of his record, his service, because he's clean, because he'd have no reason to lie. He's a handful of years away from his 30, away from retirement. Why would he risk that by lying to the feds?
She nodded, seeing the logic. But why would he risk that by involving himself in this?
Because he's a good man and a good cop.
Now Brooks rose, went to her.
Because he's raised 2 daughters, and if he doesn't imagine them in your place, I'll put them there in his head.
You're asking me to trust a man I don't know, have never met.
I know it, and don't think for a minute I don't know how much that asks. If you can't do it, we'll find another way.
She turned to the window again. Her gardens were doing so well. Her life had been so smooth, really, for the last year.
and yet nothing had really grown until she'd opened the door to Brooks. "Would you trust him with your life?"
"I would be. You're my life now."
Oh, God, you say that, and I feel I'd wither away if I lost what I've found with you. You make me want to risk the quiet, Brooks, and I thought the quiet was all I ever wanted.
"You can't keep running, Abigail."
Taking her shoulders, he turned her around to face him.
"You can't keep shutting yourself up, shutting yourself down."
I thought I could, but no, I can't. Not now. How would you do it?
"Drive to Little Rock. We couldn't risk a phone call or an email. It has to be face-to-face, not only so we don't leave a trail, but because Anson's a face-to-face type. I could be there in under 2 hours, get this started, be back before morning."
Tonight?
"What's the point in putting it off? There's a PI I guarantee is working on his laptop right now, scratching at that surface. We've got the advantage, why waste it?" He got to his feet. "You take your laptop or that iPad of yours, do your research on the captain on the way. If you're not satisfied, we turn around, come back."
You want me to go with you?
"Always. But in this case, I want him to see you, hear you. I want you to tell him the way you told me. You're scared, I don't blame you." He took her arms. "You want to take more time, to analyze, to calculate, work out details. But that's not what you did when you got out of that safe house. It's not what you did in New York when they chased after you. You went with instinct, and you beat them."
I'm going to take my alternate identification and cash, my go bag. If this goes wrong, I can't come back here.
"If it goes wrong, I'll go with you."
I know you mean that now.
"Now's where we are. You take whatever you think you need."
I want to take Bert.
Now he smiled.
"I wouldn't have it any other way."
He drove her car. Neighbors wouldn't think much about an SUV in Anson's driveway, but they'd remember a Bickford police cruiser if a badge asked somewhere down the line. While he drove, Bert did what dogs did in cars, hung his head out the back window with a dopey grin on his face, and Abigail worked on her laptop.
Your Captain Anson has an excellent record.
"He's a good cop."
Advantage or disadvantage, Abigail wondered. If he agrees to help, will you know if he's telling the truth?
"Yes. Trust me."
"I am." She looked out the side window at the blur of landscape. "More than I have anyone else in a dozen years. If this goes through and others believe me, it would lead to arrests, trials, my testimony, and there could be repercussions. You have to understand that."
"We could go on the way things are, let it alone, and I think both of us, would never feel quite okay with it. Safer, but not quite okay."
"Safe's been enough for a long time now." She looked back at him, still in wonder how one person could change everything. "It's not now. Still, it won't be enough to hurt the Volkov organization, to just damage it. To be okay and safe, we have to destroy it."
"Working on it."
"I have some ideas, but not all of them are strictly legal." She watched the grin move over his face.
"That doesn't surprise me. What do you have in mind?"
"I've been working on something, but I need to refine it a bit more. It's technical."